Welcome to Game Design Hour, the podcast where I interview the people who make the video games you know and love. I'm your host, Miles Goldsmith, and on today's episode, I'm interviewing Robert Turner about his work on the video game Triple Take. By the way, apologies about the long break in between episodes. I've been a bit busy, but I'm now back. Triple Take is a precision platforming game where the levels change and adjust as you complete them. Let's get into the interview. So what was the first thing that really sparked your interest in creating video games?
So I've mostly been programming and making games for a lot of my life. I learned coding because my mum's a website designer, so she taught me how to do like HTML. Remember, I used to code on like Dreamweaver and just make like little websites that didn't do anything. And I kind of always been quite interested in video games, like a young age, always been playing them. So it's kind of like the natural course that I'd want to start trying to make video games. You know, in school, they may use them like weird little tools to make games, like the really basic coding engines. Always been on them. And then about 5 years ago, I picked up an actual engine, GameMaker Studio 2, and I got inspired by a lot of games that I've been playing. And I thought, I want to try and be able to make something like that one day. And it's gone from there. And I've made something that's all right. So, yeah.
How did the idea for Triple Take originate?
Triple Take was originally a game jam game. If you don't know what a game jam is, it's a competition where for 48 hours you get given a theme and you have to create a game in that like given time. Then it gets judged at the end. Triple Take was one of those for a game jam called GM48, which is specific to the engine I use, GameMaker Studio 2. And back then, it kind of sucked. It was just a platformer, and the theme of the jam was falling apart, which is how I got the whole like, you do it once and then bits of the level fall away and you do it again thing. So did that. The game was not very good. It got a bit of criticism. I had never done a proper platformer before. Like I didn't know how to make satisfying movement. Like the character was too fast. Like there was no like, if you press the space bar, he jumped the same height every single time. Like if you held it, he'd go the same height as if you tapped it. Learned a lot of stuff. Like there's this thing called coyote frames where when you run off a ledge, there's like a small window where you can still jump and it'll count. And you don't think this is important, but like if you play a game without it, it just feels like you're falling off stuff all the time. So then I kind of got inspired by like the criticism really to go back and just like fix it. And it kind of spiraled from I'm going to fix all the stuff of this criticism into I'm going to make some more worlds and then like I'm going to redesign the old ones. And I did that for about 8 months on the game, maybe a year actually, I'm not sure. And then we had like the full 5 worlds done in the final game. I'm quite a fan of games that like tell us like a story, like a long, proper, like kind of deep-ish story. So I thought I'd try my hand at that. And then I spent another year basically writing the plot and like putting it in the game for Triple Take. So that's pretty much the story of development.
So what were some of the pieces of media that really inspired different elements of the game?
The platforming is inspired by, it's kind of like Super Meat Boy-ish with the whole like you die in one hit and you die quite a lot. This sounds odd, but one of the things I was sort of inspired by to make the movement system was Hollow Knight, which doesn't sound right at all. But in Hollow Knight, when you're moving like left, the second you let go of the key, your character just stops. Like there's no sideways momentum. Mm-hmm. And I thought that like for a precision platformer, which it's all about like you have to let go at the right time, I thought that would like suit it better. So I kind of just like did that. So there's no like you don't slide or anything or like build up speed. You just go at the same speed. And I think that works quite well. Main game that's inspired me to really be a game developer is Undertale and stuff basically by Toby Fox. I played it like 5 so years ago. Really inspiring. The whole reason I use GameMaker Studio 2 is because Undertale was made on that engine, really. And I don't know. I love that game. And that's sort of where I kind of drew the character interactions from. I mean, I'm nowhere near as good as Toby Fox, but I tried my best, and I think it goes all right. Because in a lot of reviews, people were saying it's like Undertale, and that means quite a lot to me. So Triple Take has these like meta horror elements in it, where it like asks you to move files around or like puts like a Windows pop-up on your display. And that's inspired by a few things. Prominent one is Doki Doki Literature Club. The game is not like Doki Doki Literature Club, really. There's no anime girls. It lifts the whole, I thought the whole meta idea of it's like interacting directly with you, the player, as a character. I thought that was really interesting. So we do that with the plot of Triple Take, where the player character isn't really a person and all the people in the game are talking like to you as a player. I think that there's this horror game called I'm Scared, which does a lot of similar things with files, which is quite interesting. And this game called One Shot, which again does the whole like windows pop up thing and it's all. And there's this bit at the end of the game where the character like walks out of the window. And I think just meta things like that is cool. So I tried my best at that. I think that covers all the games that inspired it.
Yeah, I really liked the mechanic of editing the files. How did you really come across that and decide that you wanted to use it in the game?
So kind of came about with me just messing around with Game Maker and just like looking at random commands because like sounds a bit boring. Sometimes I just read through the manual and look at all these things. I don't know what they do. And it's like, oh, show underscore message just pops up a Windows thing. And it's like, can I just use this in a game and see if it does anything? And it worked. And I was like, And I was looking at some, like there's this one bit, which I think is probably one of the coolest bits of the game where you're in a room and the window bounces around, like moves around on your desktop. And it makes the platforming harder. And that's just because I was like looking through the things and I found that you can move the window around with Game Maker. And I thought, I could do something with this. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, working on the game, did you use a design document? If so, what did it look like and how did you utilize it?
So because I'm a solo developer, it kind of gives me the like ability to just be a complete mess and things still work. So we had like a vague design document, which is just a Word document, which has every world, because in every world it introduces like 3 new mechanics or like enemies or something. So I'd write those down. I'd try and make them, and if they sucked, I'd go back and change them and do that again. So there's a lot of iterations of that. Like originally in World 5, there was supposed to be this block that like turned other blocks around it, but it just wasn't very good, so I got rid of it. We have another separate Word document for just the dialogue and the story of the game. So it just has like a summary of the plot, and then it goes down the whole thing. It's quite long. I think it's like 50 pages, but there's like a lot of gaps. So, but you know, my music guy, Tobias Roberts, love him. He would correct my grammar because my grammar is awful. So I'd send it to him and then he'd send it back over and over again. So we've got like loads of copies of it, but there is one master copy I do have on my desktop. So that's kind of how we organized the whole thing.
Pretty much every game has interesting ideas that get cut for one reason or another. You had talked about some blocks that got cut. Were there any other interesting ideas that you had thought about but just ended up not putting into the game?
Oh, yeah, we did do, like, I did program the first 2 worlds with completely different plot. And then I went back and changed it because I didn't think it was very good. So there was like it was the same basis of the story, but it was slightly different. And I thought it was a bit more boring because like there wasn't any of the NPCs in it. It was just like the AI and like the guy trapped in the game, and there was no like Flux Fennec or like Trine. So it felt a bit soulless because it was just like boring. So I went back and designed them and put them in, and I think it makes it a lot better. The whole like idea behind the like you do a level and then there's like a break bit, it's like tension curves. Mm-hmm. So it's like your tension's high doing a level and then you have a little rest break where you just like listen to a funny interaction and then you go back and do that again. Yeah, so a lot of the story was redone. There was also a few like mechanics. There was going to be this like weird block that when you stood on it, it like flipped gravity. But I didn't do that because it was like a bit complex and a bit difficult to code, to be honest. And a lot of change stuff, like fire jets used to just instantly go all the way there instead of like slowly going out, which was just a bit frustrating. So that got changed. But apart from those few things, I can't really remember anything else that was dramatically changed. Just like tweaked.
Were you working on the story as you were creating the levels, or did you create the levels and then go back and work on the story?
As I like just said, the story that like sucked and then I got rid of it. I was originally working on that with the levels. I think I worked up to World 4 and then I started making the story that I didn't like very much. And then I realized it wasn't very good, cut it, and then I finished the levels. So I made World 5. And then after that, I wrote the first the world, well, I had like a vague idea for the whole plot, but I probably wrote out the first world, coded that in, and then we had a demo on the go up in like February for Steam Fest, which just had the first world basically in it. And that went all right, and the story was quite well received, and people liked the old, let's go Windows notifications thing. So then, worked on that more. And basically for the whole of this year up to October, I've just been putting in dialogue and writing and reiterating things until it's good enough. And I think it went all right. Yeah, I think it was a pretty good way to do it because it was like you can just split your attention into one thing at a time instead of trying to work on like, because I think if I did both of them at the same time, the overall quality would be a bit lower because it's harder to like check everything at once, especially when you're in a one-man team.
What was your process for designing and creating the different levels?
What I'd do is I'd look at like old games that are similar. So before I designed all the levels, I went back and I played through like all of the Mario games again. And then from there, I kind of just like lifted ideas from that and put it in. Like there's this one bit where you have to jump on top of these like moving enemies and you have to like try stay on them while they move across a bunch of spikes. And that's kind of lifted from this one Mario level in like Mario Wii, where you have to like jump on these like flying things. I forgot what they're called. I also used to play a lot of Mario Maker, and that's just like it's kind of like a lot of platforming elements. You kind of just like get it in your brain, and then you sit down and you can just make it. There was a lot of trial and error. I have like a folder of like 12 different levels. There was probably more that I just didn't save that we just completely redid because we like tested them and it sucked, so we just did it again. But it's trial and error, and you mostly just like you put stuff together, test it, and then like if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, you do it again.
What did some of those cut levels look like?
Oh god! So in the Game Jam version of the game, which you can still actually find, I think, on the GM48 website, the levels were kind of bad. They were very bad. They relied too much on being really, really precise. So like there'd be bits where there's like a one block gap like 3 times in a row, and it would just be really frustrating. There was also a few. The game kind of suffers from this slightly, but I try to do it as least as possible. Where it's just like instead of using the like whole break mechanic, interestingly, I just go, here's 3 different pathways. You go this way this time, this way the other one. And the original game was plagued with those, and it was just a bit, some people thought they were really boring, and it's like fair enough, so I redid a few of them. But the ones in the final game today I think are acceptable. I don't think they're awful. Yeah, and the original game was very frustrating because when you died, you had to do all 3 takes again, and that was very, very hard and frustrating, and people did not like that. And it's still frustrating today, even when you have to just redo a take. But I think it's like the acceptable level of frustrating where it's like you want to keep going, and it's not like it doesn't make you despair.
Having a balanced difficulty is important so players aren't too frustrated, but are still able to have some challenge while working on the levels. How did you work to balance out the difficulty of the game?
So for difficulty, I basically I got all my friends together, and I kind of like worked out who was good at platformers and who was like, and like one of my friends, Chris, never played a platformer in his life. And the goal was basically to make sure that he could clear every level. So every time I made a new world, I'd send him a copy of the game. I'd get him to time how long it took him to do it. And if he did it in like a reasonable amount of time, like say he did a world in like an hour or an hour and a half, then it's like doable. There's also, I actually think I forgot to remove this. In the save file of the game, it tracks how many times you've died, but it never shows you that in game because there's no point. But I'd just get him to like send me a save file, and it would see how many times he's died and like on what levels. And I'd use that and go like, okay, this level's too hard, and go and fix it. So it's trial and error again. But like, it's takes time, and it's something you shouldn't really ignore, especially in a game where it's really annoying when you die.
I really loved all of the different characters in the game. What was your process for creating and designing the different characters?
So I remember, no, I sat down to design them. I was just like, I opened up a sprite I just got a big canvas. I was like, I'm just going to draw some characters. The reason the game's in two colors basically is because I'm not very good at art, but I still have to do the art for the game. So if you put it in two colors and make it pixel art, it's easier, and you can just say it's stylistic, and people and it works, and it works. So everything's black and white. A lot of the characters are made up of basic shapes. So like Trine is literally just two triangles and like two rectangles. So I just draw these little characters. And then I remember I just put like a list next to them of like basic personality things. Like this character likes this and this. So like for Flux, I put like, he likes food and he's lazy. And then from that, I kind of built on them from there. So like Vanette is like the curious one. Their names kind of like make sense. Like Vanette is like a shortened version of this word for, those like plague doctor masks, because his head kind of looks like one of those. It's like the word for that, but shortened. And Flux is called Flux because he's squishy and he teleports and stuff. And Trine is called Trine because he looks like a triangle. So that's sort of the process. But then from there, you just kind of like when you're writing in your head, you just kind of automatically start like thinking like, oh, this is how they reacted this, and you write it, and it all kind of falls into place, I think.
Were there any other characters you thought about adding but just didn't end up adding?
I was thinking of adding a few more NPCs. So there's collectibles in the game, and when you get them all, you just unlock like a music test room with a nice bit of art in it. But originally, I was going to do something with those where like there'd be like a character who like kind of like has like a library where you like unlock all of them. And there was going to be another character, just like a few more NPCs, but I thought that it would get too difficult to write so many characters and have them all be interesting. So I thought just keep it like in the game, there's only 5 characters total. And I think it keeps it relatively simple because it's easier to like give them interactions with each other without it being like so clear. Also, we did this thing with the music where every character has like a unique theme. And then when it's like, so like Venet by himself has his own theme, but then when he's talking to Flux, like a different theme plays. But then when he's talking to Trine, a different theme plays. So it would be a lot of music if we did that. Yeah, I think it was just like let's keep it simple so the player knows all these characters pretty well.
Managing scope is a really important part of creating video games. How did you work to manage the scope of the game while working on Triple Take?
So the main overscoping issue we had was the amount of worlds, because when I started off, I had no idea how long a world was going to take to make. And originally I thought I was going to do 10, and then I got to like 5 and it took a year, and I was like, I'm not thinking I want to do that again. And I was running out of like cool ideas for stages and stuff, and I didn't really want the plot to drag on for that long. So the main issue with scoping was me going like, how many worlds am I going to do? 15? Nah, 10. Nah, 5. It just kept going down. Same thing sort of with the characters. There was going to be loads of them, and then I was like, this isn't possible. I'm just going to do 3. And I was originally going to try to do this weird 2.5D thing with the art where it would like look weird, but that was really hard, so I didn't do that. And I think it would kind of ruin this visual style it's got at the moment. So whenever you start anything, what you make is not going to look like what you think it is, because you always have to scale everything back a lot. But I think that's pretty much it, yeah.
Earlier, you talked about sending copies of the game to your friends to play test. Beyond that, did you do any more public play testing, or was it just really with your friends?
So I own the game, I was publishing it myself, and then I was thinking about it in about April, and I was like, you could make the best game in the world, but if no one knows it exists, it doesn't matter. So I was thinking, I need to get myself a publisher, because that seems to be what everyone does. So I sent out all these applications for all the different places. I made a pitch deck for the game. I think I still have it somewhere. And I sent it out to all these people. And then I met Bonus Stage Publishing, who published the game. Lovely people. They handled a lot of things, including play testing. I'm not sure how they did it. I think they just like sent keys off to people, and then they'd like just relay the information back to me. So it started off when the game was like in its infancy. It was just like, I'm just gonna send this to my friend, and he'll stream it to me on Discord, and I'll see how it goes. And then it became like all the proper play testing stuff, and it So I'm not sure how the like intricacies of that work, but yeah, they kind of handled it for me.
What was it like pitching your game to all these different publishers?
It's kind of scary because you've got to talk yourself up a lot, and that's not something I'm amazing at. Because like you have to use all these big words. You have to go like, we are like this game, even if you don't think in your head, we are not as good as this at all. You've got to like say, we are like Undertale with our story. Our storytelling is like, we've got these Doki Doki Literature Club type elements, just like naming or name dropping all these big titles that in your head you're thinking, I'm nowhere near as good as these, but you just got to like do it because like if you don't like talk yourself up, then they're not going to think you're very good. So that was a challenge because I'm not very good at that, but we did do it, so it worked. So it went all right.
Which parts of the game did you have to put the most time and effort into to get just the way you wanted it?
Probably World 3. A lot of time was spent on World 3. So because water levels in games notorious for being not very fun. So I had to tweak how it worked when you swam quite a lot. Like there was originally no like the momentum was all weird. Like you drop really fast. It wasn't very fun. And then we tweaked it a bit. And then the eel guys there were a bit too big before, and I had to make them smaller. And the boss fight on that world, when it like turns into a bullet hell, because that's quite different to the rest of the game. Because I really wanted to do it because I'm quite a fan of bullet hell games. I think they're neat. So I was like, I want to do this, but I have no idea how to make like good bullet buttons. So I had to play a lot of bullet hell games, do a lot of research, tweak it, because originally the boss had like way too much health and it took ages. It still takes quite a while to be fair, but like a reasonable amount of time. So that took a lot of tweaking. And the World 2 boss, the fire thing, the firewall, that's what it's called, took so long to balance because like I'd send a copy to my friends, it would be impossible and they couldn't do it. And then I tweaked it slightly and sent it back, and then it was way too easy. So trying to find the perfect balance was really hard because it's not like Triple Take's a weird design game because like you die in one hit. So it's not just like, oh, you can just give the player more health. You've got to like sit down, look at what patterns are killing people, and then tweak them a bit, and then test it, and then see if it's too easy. Like you've got to make sure all the deaths are kind of proportionate on each attack, so they're the same difficulty, and it's also doable. So that was probably the most annoying thing I've ever done.
On the topic of boss battles, World 5's boss fight is kind of like a modified version of Pong. How did you come up with that idea, and were there any other boss fight ideas that were there that this replaced?
There was an original idea. I think it was just like you fight a big robot or something, but I thought that was a bit dull. I was kind of in this whole like bit where I was researching how you make like interesting game jam games because I started doing a lot of game jams. And it's basically you just take a game that already exists and you tweak it, and then you kind of have a good game because it's like you're building off something that's already good. So in the spirit of that, I was like, I can't think of anything like a boss fight because I don't want any more that are just like you just dodge bullets and then you win. So I was just like, let's just take simple game and change it, right? Pong. And then it just became this whole idea of it's a big Pong robot and you have to like knock it down and then go jump on it. And it kind of went from there. The World 4 boss, this one where the like little clones of you chase you around, is inspired by in like Super Mario Galaxy. There were these like comet stages where you'd get chased around by these clones of Mario that would like kill you in one hit, and it was sort of just based on that. I don't know, I do think the World 4 boss is probably the weakest boss in the game just because it's not as interesting as the other ones because it's sort of just like a normal level but something's chasing you, which is kind of the World 1 boss as well, but like it's different because the new mechanics and stuff. So it's all right, but I probably could have done a better job on World 4, but I think it works out.
Are there any fun or interesting Easter eggs that you added into the game, and have you seen many players find them?
There's a lot. I say a lot. There's like 5. That's probably not even right. There's first one. On the main menu, there's some things you can do where if you hold down certain keys, it sends you to Easter egg rooms. So example, if you hold down D, E, and V, Dev, It sends you to this dev room, which just has like me and like Tobias Roberts like icon on it, like saying what we both did. And it's just like a little cute little thing we put there. What else is there? So there's this ongoing joke in my friends group that there's this one photo of my friend Dan that's really funny. And I used it as like a test image ages and ages and ages ago, but it's been in the game files for like 2 years. And I was just looking through it the other day and I remembered it's still there. So if you hold down like D, A, and N, there's just the spinning picture of his face in a room just for no reason. No one's found that yet. No one's found that yet because it's really weird. No one's found the dev room yet. There's some hidden like spooky rooms that we've put in. So when you go into the world select, sometimes you'll see like a little ghost that will appear and then fade out, which is quite rare to appear. This is like I think it's 1 in like 200 chance this appears, but people found it on like day 1, which was disappointing. There's just like this weird glitched block appears. If you jump into it, it sends you to like this other room with like a jump scare in it. Someone found that immediately. It doesn't do anything. It's just an unused room that was scrapped from the previous story. And I was like, I have this room. I just want to put it somewhere. Let's just make a random thing appear. So did that. There's also, this is an achievement as well, so more people know about it, but there's like this like mysterious character that if you jump off this area you're not supposed to really jump off of in World 4, it teleports you to like another unused creepy room from before we changed a lot of the plot, and it just like does that and then restarts the game. But so yeah, there is a few Easter eggs. Most of them been found. The one I just told you about, like the main menu stuff, no one's found that yet, but they probably will now because I just said it. But yeah, that's it.
Can fans of the game expect to see more content in the future?
This is a maybe, because I've had an idea for a while of making like a free DLC world, basically, because I think charging people for DLC when it's just like a small game is a bit mean. So free DLC of just an extra world where the levels are just like impossibly hard, but we just give the player a double jump so the movement's like different, and just make really hard levels just for like an update like near Christmas probably is when it would come out. But I'm still on the fence about that because I kind of want to work on new stuff as well. But it's like I do kind of want to go back and update it. This is like very, very experimental, but I'm working on just an engine at the moment. It's like a really early prototype for like an RPG. And I'm thinking of using the characters from Triple Take, like Venet, Flux, and Trine, and kind of continuing their story from the end of the game, because they kind of like leave the game and go into the internet or whatever. And it's like that's all you know. But I'm thinking I could make like just like a silly RPG about that. It's still it could happen, it couldn't. It's just ideas at the moment, because just finished a 2-year project. I'm like, I don't know what to do anymore. So, yeah.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced while working on Triple Take?
It's probably struggles with visibility. I already talked about how I got like a publisher on because I was like, I don't know how to market stuff. But for 1.5 years before that, I was trying to market it myself. And like I posted in all the subreddits, I did all the Twitter posts. I looked at how you do it. I watched a lot of videos and I tried my best, but like it was really demotivating because it's really, really hard to get like your game out there. That was probably the biggest challenge because it was so demotivating, which is eventually why I got someone else in to do it. And then it was a lot better. And now a game is fairly visible, which is nice. Yeah, that was probably it, like mentally. Like code wise, when you go to a different world, the color changes. Basically, that just uses a shader to change the color, and shaders are very hard to code in a way that like is efficient. And it's a really, really basic shader, but like I suck at shaders. So that was quite hard. And then I'd made them, and then someone found a bug like a second later, and like I'd have to go fix it, and then it would break again, and that kind of sucked, and it was a lot more difficult than it really should have been, but we got it in the end.
Looking back now, is there anything you wish you could have done differently before the initial launch of the game?
I don't really think so, to be honest. I think we did everything kind of how I wanted it to, because I finished the game in about September, and then we still had a month till launch, so I kind of had all the time to like go through everything and be like, add all like their Easter eggs and stuff and all the extra stuff, and made sure it worked. Actually, I wish I did this earlier. The wall jumping in the game kind of sucked on launch, and I didn't really realize. Well, I kind of knew, but I didn't know how to fix it because I probably sat down and did it. And then it was like last week, like it was like 2 days after launch, because all the reviews came back, and there was like the wall jumping is inconsistent. I sat down for like a day. I wrote out why it doesn't work. I wrote out how to fix it. I patched it, and now the wall jumping's good. So it's better now, but I wish I did that before launch because it kind of just slipped my mind. And then the game launched, and someone who played it on like day one was like, "Damn, the wall jumping kind of sucks." But yeah, I wish I did that a bit earlier.
What would be your biggest piece of advice to a newer game dev trying to go and make their first game?
I think the best thing you can do if you're a newer game dev is just do a ton of game jams. Because if you're sitting there by yourself and you're thinking, I want an idea for a game, it's a right pain because you have to think of something unprompted, make it, and then it might just suck and you don't get the feedback. But game jams are perfect because sure, you might not sleep for a weekend, but in 48 hours, you've thought of an idea, you've been prompted with like a interest. Like I would have never thought of the take idea unless someone was like, because I was kind of forced to because of the game jam. It makes you think of something and then it makes you code it like a prototype pretty much. And then immediately you get feedback for it from judges. If you just do a ton of game jams, I kind of did this wrong actually, but if you do a load of game jams and until you get an idea that you think is good enough to expand into a whole game and people have played it and reviewed it and said, this works, this is good, you should just do that. But you see game developers a lot of the time who are new, who just like go like, I want to make an RPG and they've never made anything before. And they just give up after a bit because it's like they don't know how. And I think that you just make a ton of short games until you finally find something you're like, this is the idea. And with Triple Take, I didn't do this at all. I picked a game that did quite poorly and expanded on it.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been great interviewing you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And that's the interview. I want to thank you so much for listening or watching today's episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure to follow the show. Also consider giving us a like or review. You can also go and check out some of the older episodes in our library. If you want to stay up to date with what's going on with Game Design Hour, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok at Game Design Hour. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you next time.